Many people use US and Canadian passports to travel to mainland China. After returning to the US and Canada, they say how beautiful Mount Emei and how beautiful the Three Gorges are. How beautiful is the West Lake in Hangzhou. How magnificent is the Forbidden City in Beijing. How solemn are the Buddha statues in the Yungang Grottoes. How Guilin's landscape is the best in the world. They also often persuaded me to visit the mainland for sightseeing. They said, "You are Canadian, and applying for a visa to China is very convenient. Why don't you go for a tour? It doesn't cost much money to go with a tour group arranged by a travel agency." "I'm not going," I said. "Why not?" they asked. "Have you been to the mainland?" "I haven't been to the mainland, and I have been to the mainland." "I don't understand what you mean," they said. "I have never been to the mainland in this body." I explained, "You said I have Canadian nationality. Do you know I haven't applied for a Canadian passport yet, and I still hold a Republic of China, Taiwan, passport? However, I have been to all the places you have been to, and I even have been to all the places you have never been to." Sometimes, I wandered several places at the same time in one night. At the same time I was at the golden summit of Emei, in the Three Gorges, in the Guilin Mountains, in the Huashan Mountains, in the Shelin Temple, in the Westlake Lingyan Temple. How can that be? There is a saying in the Flower Adornment Sutra, when one body enters meditative concentration, many bodies arise. One mind travels all over the world in the 10 directions. Without abandoning this place, you can travel around all worlds. Do you understand these words? That is to say, after entering meditative concentration, you can take multiple trips concurrently with separated bodies. Is there such a thing? Friends said suspiciously, "How is it possible?" For people who have never entered meditative concentration, it is impossible. I said, "It is common for people who have entered meditative concentration, whose separated spirits go out and wander, which is the so-called magical feat ability. In fact, it's not a great magical ability, it's just a separation of consciousness. You must know that human consciousness is formed by the convergence of many individual consciousness, just like the flow of many streams of photons, which merge into a beam of light. It is like countless optical and magnetic waves that converge to form a field. The ordinary people are ignorant or unconscious of these consciousness, much less able to separate themselves. However, a Buddhist practitioner has entered a deep state of meditative concentration via his practice. His consciousness beam or energy field can be separated, and can travel in any space and time of the universe in the form of photons, let alone a place on Earth. Isn't this a myth? Someone sneered, "How can there be such a thing?" This is not a myth, this is something that everyone can achieve, and it is the realm of meditative concentration. Even if you don't pursue it, it will produce. This is in line with cosmic physics, although it is still unknown to geophysics. In fact, this is not the topmost state of meditative concentration. When did you discover that you had this ability? Someone asked me. I replied, "I have been spiritually wandering since a toddler. When I was only 3 years old, I often told my teacher about the many wonders in the depths of the universe. At that time, I was sent to Fang's elementary school as a pre-study. The children of the Fang family were all a few years older than me, and they were in the class in an orderly manner. I was too young for the class and could only sit aside and watch. Maybe there was no nursery nearby at that time? Or because of poverty, my mother left me there in care. I remember that I used to sit on a small bench specially prepared for me, beside teacher Fang, a man of about 30 years old, was always my companion until I entered kindergarten at full age. Every day, he taught the children how to recite the cat jumps and the puppy barks, and taught them how to read and write. When students were studying, he would sit and play with me, and he would have to listen patiently to me telling stories that he might not even understand. What are you talking about? I am talking about a large sphere with a halo, about flying broom stars, flying icebergs and eerie rocks, glowing clumps of hot gas, and deep, deep, dark, unfathomable swirling deep holes. I also talked about seeing a lot of luminous people flying around, and I was flying and playing on several large glowing gas spheres at the same time, and also play on the flaming giant ball. There are many children like me flying together with me, and they are all luminous. Friend said, these words don't seem like something a 3-year-old toddler could say. Moreover, cosmic science had not yet developed 40 years ago. How do you know this? I laughed. Mr. Fang was frightened by me, and he said my nerves were malfunctioning and I had too many fantasies because what I said every day was different, all were bizarre, and all were cosmic wonders that had not yet been discovered by science at that time. He was surprised, but he enjoyed hearing my nonsense. Mr. Fang and I became close friends, and he heard from me about many strange phenomena that were unprecedented. Didn't he ask how you knew? I replied, I went to see it. As soon as I fell asleep, I went to the deep blue sky. Teacher Fang said that I was dreaming. But he couldn't understand how a 3-year-old could have so many strange extraterrestrial dreams. He asked how I got there? I said, when I wanna go, I flew there right away. Sometimes I flew to gas stars, sometimes I flew to the spinning huge glowing egg yolk. So hot, I didn't know these were called galaxies at the time. Teacher Fang said that my nerves are abnormal, and I was a child with mental disorder. Later, when I entered the kindergarten, I painted kittens, dogs, children, and teachers as skeletons, as well as their internal organs, which scared the female teacher to death. Asked me what was going on. I said I saw it like this. However, after the grade 1 of elementary school, I stopped talking about those weird things and never drew scary transparent paintings. You didn't see that anymore? They asked. I saw that less, but I still remember something. I drew a grand western mansion adorned with dotted lines and many light bulbs. My mother thought it was my fantasy again. My fantasy was well known, and teachers used to tell my mother about my fantasy, this building. Until 1966, when we traveled to Victoria with friends in Canada, I truthfully saw it with my bare eyes for the first time. It was a provincial mansion, and as soon as I saw it, I said I was here when I was a kid, and I could still recognize it. At night, its bulbs are all on and adorn the splendid ancient palace of bulbs, just as I saw it in my childhood. Is this a hunch? They asked. Yes and no, I saw it when I was spiritually wandering as a child, but I didn't foresee that I would be here in more than 20 years. Learning Buddhism and practicing meditative concentration will lead to these realms. Although the purpose of studying Buddhism is not to pursue these realms, it will inevitably happen. This is just the release of potential, neither the realm of demons, nor the realm of enlightenment, just a very natural supranational phenomenon. There is no need to make a fuss. This is just one of the necessary states to learn Buddhism and enter meditative concentration. I don't believe that there are people whose spirit can separate from his body and travel, one lady said. I have traveled all over the mainland. Layman Faun, today I want to give you a test. Can you talk about the scenery of your wandering continent? If you say it right, I will be convinced and believe in Buddhism. Okay. Everyone applauded and anticipated to listen to me. This kind of confirmation is unnecessary and meaningless originally. Since you insist, let's casually talk about it, I smiled. In around 1973, I recalled, I was very unlucky in those years, starting to do business, losing money and being sued. I was unemployed and in poor health, and I had to send money back to my hometown to help my seriously ill maternal grandma and my poor father. My mother was sickly, and I was so mentally distressed that year. The only source of income was the manuscript fees of a magazine. However, they changed their style to publish mainly romance novels and no longer adopted my articles. I can't describe how upset I was. Meanwhile, my another body was flying under the goddess peak of the Three Gorges. I was flying over the turbulent river. I liked the danger, grandeur, and poetic atmosphere of the cloud, of the scenery in this section of the Three Gorges. I flew against the stone wall and saw the square hole of the trestle made by the ancient soldiers on the stone wall. There was no trestle anymore, only small holes remained. I saw line after line of trackers, naked, dragging their ropes on the rapids, groaning in pain. My tears welled up, and I flew down to help them. I pushed the great sails of their wooden boats. They saw that the boat was moving, only their sails had wind but others didn't. What a strange wind! They said, what kind of wind is this? One day, it was like a dream but not a dream. My separated bodies concurrently flew to the golden top of Mount Emei in several places. A body was at the golden peak of Emei Mountain's cliff, covered by a rainbow, like circle of Buddha's light, manifesting itself on the sea of clouds. Nearby tourists exclaimed, what's going on? Nobody on the cliff, but on the sea of clouds, a human figure appears within the circle of the Buddha's light. Some of them prostrated and chanted Buddha, while other tourists who did not believe in Buddhism watched in awe. Then I had an idea. Immediately, I jumped out of the circle of light and came to tease the monkeys on the stone fence in front of Bogo Temple. Those mischievous monkeys sometimes scratch and bite people, were not like the cultivating monkeys at all. I tickled them left and right, scaring them into squeaking and running away in packs. The tourists had no idea why the monkeys suddenly fled away, so I laughed out loud, but no one heard me. When I looked up at this tremendous Buddha statue hundreds of feet high, I felt indescribable peace and emotion in my heart. The Buddha statue smiled faintly and nodded to me, and I scrambled to my knees, right on the river surface. It was not the first time that the Buddha statues nod to me. I remember that I often entered temples or palaces in my dreams, and those statues of Buddha, Bodhisattvas, errants, and the guardians of the temple, all stood up and greeted me with smiles and nods. And none of the pilgrims in the temple saw me, nor did they know that the Buddha statue had arisen. I still often go to the Lama Buddha palace in my dreams. The Buddha statue arises and greets me with a smile, and I come forward and prostrate. However, I had never been to the giant Buddha by the river before, and I didn't expect the giant Buddha to nod and greet me too. I was so panicky that I prostrated and kept bowing. My third body was flying over a river where three rivers merge. I saw a small boat with a dozen tourists on board, heading towards a cliff. In the midst of the cliff sits an incomparably enormous Buddha statue, whose head is flush with the top of the cliff and its feet is on the riverbank. 40 or 50 tourists were standing on the back of the Buddha's feet and taking pictures. The Buddha's face has a very benevolent expression. On the lower left side of the Buddha, stood a Veda Bodhisattva statue also carved on the cliff. To the right of the Buddha statue are hundreds of winding stone steps. Some visitors walked up the steps to a small pavilion at the top of the cliff, overlooking the scenery of the river and mountains. I could fly onto the Buddha's body, but I didn't dare to offend, just flew onto the boat. More than a dozen people on the boat had no sense of my presence. The boatman punted the boat, the bamboo poles hit the rocks at the bottom of the water, and the sound was crisp and clear. The boat slowly docked, and the tourists went up. None of them worshipped the Buddha. I was the only one who prostrated before the toes of the Buddha under the cliff. I went up the steps from the left side of the Veda Bodhisattva statue. "Come back, child." I felt the giant Buddha communicating his thoughts to me. "You've lost for a long time, still not coming back?" I suddenly burst into tears like rain, choked with sobs, and fell prostrate at the Buddha's feet with indescribable feelings of admiration. I sobbed mournfully and repented, not knowing how long it had been. Suddenly, my three bodies were united, and I woke up still in Vancouver. The moon was bright, and stars were sparse outside the window. It was 3 a.m., and my mother was asleep soundly in the next room. The robin was screaming outside, and my tear stains were still there. Then I understood that I had been lost for more than 20 years since I was 7 years old. I only clung to the pursuit of fame and fortune. Although I also recited the Buddha but never practiced. I knew the three poisons caused my suffering, and I had lost my supersensible instinct for 20 years. I had gradually drifted away from Buddhism. From then on, I aspired to return to Buddhism. I also started my Buddhist writing. I wrote my first Buddhist essay, Essays on the Eternal Confession, titled What I Know About Buddhism. Over the past 10 years, I have gradually regained my power, the celestial I, the wisdom I, and the Dharma I, which I had achieved from my previous 5 lifetimes of cultivation. I am also stepping on the path of propagating the Dharma to help sentient beings, and I am very content and full of Dharma joy today. Oh! So there are all these ups and downs. Everyone said, that was unbelievable. The giant Buddha you have been to, the lady said, is our great Buddha of Sichuan, and what you said about the light of the Buddha and the monkeys on Mount Emei is also correct. I am from Sichuan and am familiar with all of these. Now I am convinced there really are Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. One body enters meditative concentration, and many bodies arise, which is the basic ability of magical feat. I manifested into 3 bodies and traveled in mainland China. Is it true? Or is it an illusion?